What happens when a mother dares to defy everything her culture demands, just to protect her daughter's freedom? This is not just a story, it's a revolution wrapped in love, sacrifice, and truth. If you've ever felt torn between tradition and what's right, this emotional journey will hit you deep. Stay with us, because the silence ends here. Before we continue, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more stories like this. The sun rose over the village of Hillstone like any other day. Roosters crowed, smoke rose from clay chimneys, and women bustled through their morning routines. But inside the Mitchell home, a storm was brewing. Grace Mitchell stood at the window of her living room, staring blankly at the garden. Her hands clutched the edge of the curtain, and her heart beat rapidly in her chest. Outside, women from the village were decorating the compound for her daughter's betrothal ceremony. Colorful ribbons hung from trees, flowers were scattered across the courtyard, and traditional drums beat softly in the background. But Grace felt no joy. She turned her head slowly toward the stairs, knowing that her daughter Lily was in her room, crying. Footsteps echoed on the tiled floor. Pastor Thomas Mitchell, her husband of 27 years, entered the room, dressed in a long, maroon robe with gold embroidery. He adjusted the Bible tucked under his arm and glanced at his wife. "Grace, have you finished preparing Lily's attire? The guests will arrive before noon. Everything must be perfect." Grace forced a small nod. "Yes, I'm almost done." He studied her face for a moment, then gave a slight grunt and walked outside to oversee the cooking. As he left, the heaviness in the room deepened. Grace felt trapped, like a bird in a gilded cage. Upstairs, Lily sat on the edge of her bed, clutching her scholarship letter in one hand and a tissue in the other. Her eyes were red and puffy. She stared at the letter, reading it for the 10th time. "Congratulations! You have been awarded a full academic scholarship to Brighton Medical School." She sniffled, then carefully folded the letter and slid it under her pillow. Her fingers brushed against her journal, where she had written her dreams for the past 3 years, dreams that were now being buried under the weight of tradition. A knock at the door startled her. "It's me," Grace's voice came through softly. "Come in," Lily said, wiping her eyes quickly. Grace entered, holding a folded head wrap and a delicate pink blouse with lace sleeves. "I thought you might want to try this before the ceremony," Grace said, attempting to sound normal. Lily looked at her mother, her lips trembling. "Mom, I don't want to do this." Grace's heart ached. She sat beside her daughter, gently placing the head wrap on the bed. "Elijah is a good man," Grace began, but the words felt bitter in her mouth. "He comes from a respected family. Your father believes." "My father believes in control," Lily snapped. "Elijah doesn't care about me. He said I'm not allowed to work. He said I'll stay home, raise children, and serve his family. That's not love, Mom. That's prison." Grace looked down, ashamed. "Lily, I was your age when I married your father. I didn't love him either. But I learned to survive." "I don't want to survive," Lily said, raising her voice. "I want to live. I got into Brighton Medical School. I have a scholarship. I can be a doctor, Mom. I can help people. Isn't that better than being someone's possession?" Tears welled in Grace's eyes. "Your father will never allow it. He's already paid the bride price. The elders are expecting the blessing today." Lily stood, anger rising. "So you're just going to let it happen? Again? Like it happened to you?" Grace took a shaky breath. "It's not that simple." "It is," Lily cried. "Just say no. Just tell them I'm not doing it. Tell them you won't let them destroy me like they destroyed you." Grace remained silent. "I thought you were strong," Lily whispered, turning away. The words stabbed at Grace's heart. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, tattered journal. "This belonged to your great-grandmother," she said, her voice barely audible. "They never speak of her. They say she disappeared, ran away from her marriage. But she left this behind. I found it in the attic when I was newly married." Lily turned to look at the worn brown leather cover. She wrote about her dreams, Grace continued. Her hopes. Her rebellion. She wanted to be a teacher. She refused an arranged marriage and left. She was erased from the family records, but she lived. Lily reached for the journal, slowly opening it. The day you let them silence your truth is the day you bury your soul. She read the line aloud, her voice soft. Grace stood. I have to finish the cooking. Mom, Lily said, gripping the journal tightly. Please don't let them silence mine. Grace hesitated at the door. I'll try. I don't know how, but I'll try. That night, the Mitchell house was quiet. The guests had left, the candles had burned out, and the soft hum of crickets filled the air. Grace sat alone in the kitchen, her fingers tracing the edge of the wooden table. The journal lay open in front of her. She read the pages slowly, as if the words were secrets passed from one generation of silenced women to the next. They called me a disgrace. They said I brought shame. But I would rather be free and forgotten than caged and remembered. Grace closed the book and wiped away a tear. She made her way upstairs to Lily's room. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, Lily sat by the window, staring out at the moonlight. I couldn't sleep, Lily said without turning. Me neither, Grace replied, stepping in. They sat together in silence for a moment. Do you think she ever regretted it? Lily asked. Your grandmother. Grace shook her head. Not once. I think she regretted the years she stayed silent before she ran. But not her freedom. Lily looked down at her lap. I can't do this, Mom. I can't marry him. I'll run away if I have to. Daniel's aunt said I can stay with her in the city. Daniel. Grace raised an eyebrow. Lily nodded. We've been together for a while. He respects me. He supports my dreams. But he's not from our village. That's why no one would accept him. Grace smiled sadly. Love doesn't ask for permission. It only asks for truth. Will you come with me? Lily asked, her eyes pleading. If I run, will you run too? Grace's heart pounded. She thought of Thomas, of his stern face, his raised voice, his loyalty to the council and the church. She thought of the women in the village who would whisper behind her back. She thought of the home she had built, and the cage it had become. I've lived my whole life obeying rules I never chose, Grace whispered. If I leave with you, there's no turning back. I know, Lily said, taking her mother's hand. But at least we'll be free. Grace nodded slowly. Then we'll make a plan. Just then, they heard the floor creak outside. Grace quickly hid the journal under the bed and stood as Thomas opened the door. He looked at both of them suspiciously. What's going on? Just talking, Grace replied, keeping her voice even. Thomas frowned. It's late. Tomorrow is the blessing ceremony. She'll need rest. He looked at Lily. Don't bring shame to this family. He closed the door behind him. Lily exhaled sharply. He suspects something. Grace walked to the window and stared into the night. Then we have to be careful. And we have to act fast. They sat in the darkness, the weight of the decision settling over them. The walls of the house seemed to whisper with the voices of women who had once dared to dream. Women who had been silenced. Women who had never run. But Grace would not be one of them. The sun had barely risen when Lily left the house the next morning, her heart pounding with every step. Grace had told her to go, to speak with Daniel, but only if she was careful. Thomas was already at the church with the village elders, busy preparing for the blessing ceremony. Lily hurried along the narrow dirt path that led past the farmland and toward the stream. The mango tree ahead stood like a silent guardian of her secret, a place where she and Daniel had met many times before. He was already waiting. Daniel Harper, tall with kind eyes and a gentle smile, looked up as she approached. He wore a simple blue shirt and jeans, his dark brown curls tousled by the morning breeze. You came, he said softly, walking toward her. I had to, Lily replied, falling into his arms. He held her tightly. I heard about the engagement. My aunt said she saw the village women dancing. They're celebrating something that feels like my funeral, Lily whispered. Daniel pulled away slightly, looking into her eyes. We can leave, Lily. My aunt in Lagos is ready. She said you can stay with her. You can still apply for your visa. We'll figure everything out together. I talked to my mom last night, Lily said. She's scared, but she's changing. She gave me her grandmother's journal. The woman ran away from an arranged marriage too. Daniel raised his eyebrows. That's brave. Do you think your mom would really come with you? She said she would. But it's hard for her. She's lived her whole life under my father's rules. He would never forgive her. Daniel took her hands. Then we have to be smart. We need a plan. We can't wait too long. What if he finds out about us? Lily nodded. You're right. I'll talk to my mom tonight. We'll decide then. They embraced again, clinging to each other like two birds planning escape from a cage. But neither of them saw the boy hiding behind the bushes, watching with wide eyes and quick feet. Within an hour, the village council would know that Lily Mitchell had been meeting with Daniel Harper, the outsider. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered over the Mitchell home, not in the sky, but in the air. Grace was sweeping the kitchen when she heard angry voices outside. Thomas had returned. He burst into the house, followed by 3 elders and Reverend Charles. Where is she? He shouted. Where is Lily? Grace dropped the broom, her hands shaking. She's upstairs. Call her down. Thomas barked. Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, startled by the shouting. Her heart dropped as she saw the group of elders in the living room. One of them stepped forward. We have been informed that your daughter has been engaging in a shameful relationship with an outsider. Is it true? Lily stood frozen. Grace moved toward her slowly and nodded for her to come down. She has been seeing a boy named Daniel Harper, Thomas spat. A boy from outside this community. A boy whose family has no standing among us. He's a good person, Lily said, her voice trembling. He respects me. He encourages me to be more than just a wife. Enough. Reverend Charles raised his hand. This is not the time for childish opinions. The council has decided. The engagement to Elijah must proceed immediately. The blessing will happen tonight. Then she will marry him within the week. No, Grace said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. What did you say? Thomas asked, narrowing his eyes. I said no, Grace repeated, her voice firmer. She will not marry Elijah. Thomas stepped closer. You dare defy me? In front of the council. I dare because I am her mother, Grace said, her voice rising. And I will not watch my daughter be sacrificed to a life she doesn't want. Not like I was. Gasps echoed around the room. Even Lily stared at her mother in shock. Reverend Charles's eyes turned cold. You are rejecting the ways of our ancestors. You are bringing shame upon your household. Grace stepped in front of Lily. Our ancestors were not always right. Some of them forced their daughters into silence. Some of them erased women who wanted to live freely. We are not bound to repeat their mistakes. Thomas's face darkened. Then you and this ungrateful child are no longer welcome in this home. So be it, Grace replied. She turned to Lily. Go pack your things. We're leaving. Where will you go? One of the elders mocked. You think the world outside this village will accept a disobedient wife and a defiled daughter? We'll take our chances, Grace said, lifting her chin. Because I would rather walk into the unknown with my daughter's head held high than stay in a house built on fear. They walked out as the elders and neighbors watched in stunned silence. No one had ever dared defy the council so openly. Mother and daughter walked into the dusk, not knowing exactly where the road would lead, but knowing that, for the first time in their lives, they were walking it together and on their own terms. The village was silent as Grace and Lily stepped out of the house. Eyes peered from behind curtains, whispers danced through the air. No one dared to speak openly, but the message was clear. Grace Mitchell had just done the unthinkable. Lily clutched her small duffel bag tightly, tears stinging her eyes. Her legs felt heavy, but her heart beat with a strange combination of fear and freedom. Grace held her head high, walking with slow but steady steps. Her fingers trembled as she clutched Lily's hand. Every footstep echoed the sound of chains breaking. They walked through the dusty path until they reached the edge of the village, where Aunt Martha lived in a small, weathered bungalow covered with creeping vines. Martha opened the door, her face pale when she saw them. "Grace? Lily?" Grace didn't speak. She simply walked inside. Once the door shut, Martha locked it and drew the curtain. "I heard what happened," she whispered. "Thomas is furious. They say Reverend Charles plans to excommunicate you." Grace sat down slowly. "Then let them. I will not offer my daughter as a sacrifice to their pride." Lily looked at her aunt. "Can we stay here for a few nights?" Martha nodded. "Of course. This house may be small, but you're safe here." Grace placed the journal on the table. "There's something you need to see." Martha opened it and gasped. "This belonged to Mama Ruth, our grandmother. I thought it was destroyed. She left it behind. She ran away, remember?" Grace said. "She was erased from the family. They called her a curse. But I always admired her," Martha said, her voice cracking. Lily looked at them both. "Why did no one ever talk about her?" "Because truth makes tradition uncomfortable," Grace answered. They sat together late into the night, the three women sharing stories and grief. For the first time in years, Grace felt a spark in her chest, a light that had been buried deep inside her. That night, she dreamed of a chain snapping in half. The sound was loud, echoing. And in that sound, she heard freedom. Word spread quickly. By morning, everyone in Hillstone had heard that Grace Mitchell had walked out on her husband and refused the village's chosen match for her daughter. Reverend Charles stood before the church congregation and declared that Grace and Lily were no longer welcome in the house of God until they repented. Their names were scratched off the women's guild list. Their pictures were taken off the church's wall. But Grace didn't flinch. She spent her days helping Lily gather documents for her visa. Daniel visited discreetly, bringing forms and updates. Martha helped too, always looking over her shoulder, afraid of what the council might do next. One afternoon, as Grace was sweeping the small porch, an old woman slowly approached. Her cane tapped softly on the stone path. "Grace Mitchell?" she asked. "Yes," Grace said, wiping her hands. "I'm Ruth. Old woman Ruth." Grace's eyes widened. "Mama Ruth." The woman chuckled. "They buried me alive in stories, but yes, I'm still breathing." Lily came outside, stunned. "You knew our great-grandmother?" "I was her friend. Her closest friend," Ruth said. "When she ran, she came to me. I helped her escape the village and start a new life in the city. She sent letters, you know, for years. But none were ever read." Grace felt tears build in her eyes. She wasn't a disgrace. "No," Ruth said firmly. "She was a seed. A quiet rebellion. And now, you are the tree that grew from it." They sat on the porch for hours as Ruth told them stories that had never been told in Hillstone. Of women who dreamed. Of men who punished them. Of the price of silence. As the sun set, Ruth stood to leave. "They'll try to shame you," she said. "But shame only works on those who believe they've done something wrong. You've done something holy." She walked away slowly, her cane tapping like a rhythm of resistance. That night, Grace wrote in the journal beside her grandmother's fading ink. "The fire is still alive. This time, I will not let it go out." Lily sat at the kitchen table, fingers trembling as she hit submit on her online visa application. She looked up at her mother and Martha, both standing nearby, holding their breath. "It's done," Lily whispered. "The application is in." Grace exhaled deeply, smiling through her exhaustion. "Whatever happens next, you've already won, Lily." That evening, Daniel came to visit again. This time, he brought an envelope. "I got a job offer," he said, beaming. "A part-time lab technician position in Lagos. It's not much, but it's a start. I can help support Lily while she prepares for school." Grace studied him carefully. "Why are you doing all this for her?" Daniel looked at Lily, then back at Grace. "Because she's worth it. Because I see a future with her, not as someone who will serve me, but someone I will walk beside." Grace felt a lump rise in her throat. She remembered being Lily's age, wishing for a man who spoke with such respect. "I hope you mean those words," Grace said softly. "Because if you ever try to dim her light, I will come for you myself." Daniel smiled and nodded. "I understand." As the weeks passed, Lily's application moved forward. Martha's home, once a quiet refuge, now buzzed with planning, paperwork, and occasional laughter. There were still tense moments, occasional knocks on the door from council members trying to persuade them to return, but Grace no longer hesitated. One morning, a letter arrived. It bore the seal of the British consulate. With trembling hands, Lily opened it. "Dear Miss Lily Mitchell, we are pleased to inform you that your Tier 4 student visa has been approved." She screamed in joy, leaping into her mother's arms. Grace hugged her tightly. "You did it. You're going to be free." But beneath the joy, a new anxiety bloomed. Time was running out before Lily's departure, and Grace knew a storm was coming. The morning Lily was set to leave for Lagos, a crowd gathered outside Martha's gate. Grace peeked through the curtain and saw Thomas standing in front, flanked by Reverend Charles and two elders. "They are here," she whispered. Martha bolted the door. "You can't take her," Grace said firmly as she opened the door. "She is still my daughter," Thomas growled. "And you are still my wife." "No," Grace replied. "Not anymore. The moment you chose pride over love, control over compassion, you lost us." Reverend Charles stepped forward. "Lily, if you leave, you can never return. You'll be cut off from your people." "I'd rather be cut off from this village," Lily said, stepping into view, "than be cut off from who I really am." Thomas's face darkened. "You will regret this. The world is not kind to disobedient women." "The world might not be kind," Grace said, "but we are no longer afraid of it." A car pulled up to the gate. Daniel stepped out, followed by his aunt. She walked confidently past the angry men and nodded at Grace. "Everything's ready," she said. "Let's go." Grace turned to Martha and hugged her tightly. "Thank you for being the first to open your door." Martha smiled through tears. "Go and be loud, Grace. Be everything they told us not to be." With one final look at the village that had once defined them, Grace and Lily walked toward the car. As they drove away, Lily rested her head on her mother's shoulder. "Are you scared?" she asked. Grace looked out at the open road ahead. "Yes, but I'm more scared of staying silent." Behind them, the village gates grew smaller, until they disappeared completely. Ahead of them, a new life was just beginning. The Lagos air felt thicker, noisier, and far more alive than anything Lily had known in Hillstone. Cars honked constantly, vendors shouted from every corner, and the smell of grilled suya mixed with diesel fumes in the air. Yet despite the chaos, Lily felt at peace. Grace looked out of the cab window as the cityscape zipped by. Her scarf fluttered slightly in the wind, and her eyes sparkled with cautious wonder. This was the first time she had left the village in over 2 decades. They arrived at Daniel's aunt's flat, a modest apartment on the 3rd floor of a bustling complex. As they walked up the stairs, Lily held Grace's hand. "You okay, Mom?" she asked. Grace smiled. "I think I am." I feel like I'm seeing the sky for the first time. Daniel's aunt, Auntie Elsie, opened the door with a wide smile. Welcome, welcome. Come in. Make yourselves at home. The apartment was cozy and bright, with bookshelves lining the walls and the scent of jollof rice wafting from the kitchen. It felt like a home filled with dreams. Over the next few days, Lily began preparing for her departure to the UK. She met with other students at the consulate, printed her acceptance letter again, and finalized her plans. Daniel was there every step of the way, always encouraging, never controlling. Grace, meanwhile, spent her days journaling, walking through the city markets, and sitting at Auntie Elsie's balcony watching the people pass by. For the first time in her life, no one expected anything of her. One evening, as the city lights flickered below, Lily joined her mother on the balcony. "Do you think Dad misses us?" Lily asked. Grace sipped her tea. "I think he misses control. But missing us? That would require understanding what love truly means." Lily nodded quietly. "Sometimes I think about the girls back in Hillstone. I wonder how many of them are still trapped." Grace turned to her daughter. "Then we don't forget them. We use our freedom to speak, to help, to open the gates for others." And just like that, a seed was planted. The day Lily left for the UK was bittersweet. Auntie Elsie packed a lunchbox full of meat pies and chin-chin. Daniel handed Lily a small pendant with her initials, and Grace hugged her so tightly it hurt. "You have everything?" Grace asked, brushing invisible dust off Lily's shoulders. "Yes, Mom," Lily laughed. "Passport, visa, letter, and your blessing." Grace's eyes shimmered. "And don't forget the journal." Lily tapped her carry-on bag. "It's in here. I'll read a page every night." At the airport gate, Daniel and Grace waved as Lily turned around one last time, her smile wide, her eyes hopeful. "I'll make you proud," she called out. "You already have," Grace whispered. Weeks passed. Then months. Lily settled into university life, thriving in her classes, making friends from all over the world. Grace and Daniel kept in touch with her constantly, video calls, letters, photos. Back in Lagos, Grace began volunteering at a center for young women fleeing forced marriages. She shared her story, encouraged them, and slowly built a reputation as a quiet warrior. One day, Grace was invited to speak at a women's rights event. She stood before a crowd, holding her grandmother's journal in her hand. "When I chose to protect my daughter's freedom," she said, "I thought I was doing it just for her. But now I know, I was doing it for every girl who has ever been told her voice doesn't matter. Tradition is not evil. But truth must not be buried under it." The audience applauded. Some cried. A fire had been lit in their hearts. And as Grace looked up at the sky that had once felt unreachable, she smiled. The chains had broken. The silence had ended. And from it all, a legacy had begun. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Share it with someone who needs the courage to speak up. Subscribe for more powerful stories that give voice to the unheard. And in the comments, tell us, what tradition would you break to protect the truth? Your voice matters. Let's keep this fire burning.